Focus to Ethiopia now, a country that has been embroiled in civil war for a year. Ethiopia's government has dismissed international calls for a ceasefire and has instead vowed to fight on in what it describes as an existential war against the Tigrayan rebels. The government's communications office put out an aggressive statement saying that it is not a country that crumbles under foreign propaganda. Rebel groups in Ethiopia have advanced further towards the country's capital. The latest advancement has also dampened hopes for a settlement between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. As pressure mounts on the Prime Minister, sources say 9 anti-government factions, including the TPLF, will form an alliance to fight the government. The group will hold a signing ceremony in Washington. On Thursday, African and Western nations called for an immediate ceasefire after Tigray forces made fresh advances. The United States also called for an immediate end to hostilities from all sides. Jeffrey Feltman, US Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, met Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister, the Defence Minister and the Finance Minister in the capital, Addis Ababa, on Thursday. Far from nearing its end, the war, till now, had been confined to the country's northern Tigray region, but it's now on the brink of reaching the capital city. The TPLF announced that it was just 325 kilometres northeast of Addis Ababa. The Ethiopian government has declared a nationwide state of emergency for 6 months. This includes ending communications and public transportation and ordering the residents of Addis Ababa to prepare to defend their neighbourhoods. Under the state of emergency, any citizen who has reached the age of military service could be called up to fight. Western countries like the United States and Britain are now urging their citizens to leave the country. The US Embassy is allowing voluntary departure of its staff and their families, while the British Embassy has warned that it is likely to become more difficult to leave Ethiopia in the coming days. Since November last year, the conflict in Africa's second most populous country has killed thousands of people, forced more than 2 million from their homes, and left thousands of others in famine-like conditions. Well, for more on this, we can cross live to WION's correspondent Coletta Wanjohi, who's joining us live in Addis Ababa. Coletta, look, the problems seem to be continuing for the Prime Minister. There's this continued offensive from the Tigray People's Liberation Front, but also we're hearing that 9 anti-government factions are forming an alliance to try and push a political transition in the country. How much do these issues complicate this already year-long conflict?
Well, Nick, as you can imagine, then the conflict has taken a totally different turn altogether if we are having different parties making up a coalition reportedly to oust the current regime and have a transitional government. So that kind of really shakes the stability of the Prime Minister's government because then he has to fight 2 fronts. He has to fight the security front, where he has to ensure that he takes over control of areas that have been taken by the rebel forces, now the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And on the other side, he has to fight to ensure that he stays on as the Prime Minister, because his government says he was legitimately elected in the past elections, and he deserves to be here and ensure that the Constitution is followed in the country. Well, at the end of the day, it is the humanitarian aspect that really bothers the United Nations and also the international community. With over 7 million people affected by this conflict in the past year, the fact that no one is talking about dialogue, people are now talking about transitional government and all that, that means the table for talks is being avoided, by both parties, and that becomes an issue. And probably that's why we have seen Jeffrey Feltman coming here, the US Special Envoy. We are seeing the African Union working around the clock to convince the government and the rebel forces to come to the table. We are seeing neighboring countries now. Kenya has spoken out, Uganda has spoken out, and they are hoping that before all this falls into a more complicated issue, then probably the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the main warring faction, which is the Tigray People's Liberation Front, will accept to see reason and start talking. But until that happens, then we are seeing, unfortunately, more conflict and more fighting in the offing.